Hello YouTube, I am so pumped for this video today. I am doing the Adapt a Book tag. I saw one of my favorite YouTubers, the Library of Alexandria, did this the other day for Foundry Side. I saw it and immediately I was like, I've got to do that, and I got to do it with the first book in my favorite series of all time, the Malazan Book of the Fallen, Gardens of the Moon. I think I mentioned in one of my videos, I run a coffee shop and movie theater as my day job, and so this is right up my alley, my love of reading with my love for film. I'm excited to do this. Let's get into it. Also, as a side note, Gardens of the Moon was actually first written as a screenplay, so I have an advantage on probably a lot of other fantasy works where at least a little bit of film structure is baked into this book. All right, so question 1. Congratulations, you're attempting to adapt a favorite book into a movie and a film studio is interested in financing your project. But they want a brief summary of the story in 25 words or less. Give it all you've got in no more than 25 words. This was so hard. 25 words is like nothing. My first one I did and I was so proud of myself, and it was like 62 words or whatever. So this is very stripped back. That's what I got. The Malazan Empire seeks to conquer the last prosperous free city, Darujistan, through the espionage of a group of elite soldiers, the Bridge Burners. That's pretty good, right? You'd watch that movie. I should say, from here on out, there might be some minor spoilers. I don't think any of it is going to take away from a first-time reader's enjoyment of Gardens of the Moon, but I don't want to constrain myself of thinking about that while I'm talking about it. So from here on out, you've been warned. If you haven't, read Gardens of the Moon. Second question, you've secured funding, but the budget dictates that a character has to be cut. Who's out? No cheating, this must be a named character, not Goblin number 2. Now, I could cheat a little bit because there's a lot of named characters in Gardens of the Moon, and it'd be easy, it's still hard from a reader perspective, from a movie perspective to say oh, I'm gonna cut out Trots, or something like that. I am going to make this harder on myself, and I am going to try to cut out a main element of the story, or a main character in the element, or a main character in the story. This might ruffle some feathers, but Krupp gotta go. No, just kidding. Of course, not Krupp. That'd be crazy. But I do think one storyline that could be eliminated in a film adaptation is the hairlock storyline. I am going to get some pushback on that because it was a great storyline. It introduces us to the idea of chaos, which is very important to the Malazan world as a whole. But I think if we're just thinking about this from a Gardens of the Moon adaptation, for that movie to be a success, I don't think we need hairlock and this talking puppet from the beginning. I just don't think that is necessary. If people out there are really you can't do the story without hairlock, I don't agree with you obviously, but the next character to go I think would be Murillo. I think you would kind of bake some of his character into Cole, or just eliminate it as a whole just to reduce one character in the Phoenix Inn crew. Again, I love that character, don't want to do that, especially for later on in the series, but for just Gardens of the Moon, I think you can get rid of one of those guys, and Murillo would be the one. Question number 3. Which scene is going to be the most difficult to adapt from book to movie script? I thought about this a lot. One of the big hardships with adapting a book, particularly a fantasy book, into a movie is not being able to see inside of characters' heads. Think about how much of a fantasy novel is from being in the perspective of the person or character that you're in. Right, you hear their thoughts and their feelings. And I think one storyline that is so important for Gardens of the Moon, but that is mostly internal, is the Sari transformation from being, spoiler, possessed to being Apsalar. So I think that's going to be the hardest element to change into a script. Question 4, your script is complete. Which scene do you anticipate being the most difficult to film? Now this is of course different than being difficult to adapt, like the last question, but to film. I think this one's pretty obvious. The Raced resurrection scene and his duel with the dragons is just hard. It's going to be a lot of visual effects. Well, you have to decide how much money to spend there versus other areas of the book. And it's just hard to make a believable dragon fight against a jagged tyrant. I mean, that's visually, it's tough. How do you communicate the power that's happening there in also a way that is semi-believable or isn't so huge that it brings viewers out of the experience? That's tough. that I think is going to be a really hard scene to think about how we are logistically going to shoot it. Kind of a sub to that and related is just Warrens in general will be very difficult. Do you shoot them as like alternate realities? Do you shoot them as just like streams or like light? I think that is also a very hard film trick that you'd have to employ, is how to communicate that working of the magic. Question 5. What themes are vital to the story which must not be lost in translation? Now the easy answer here would be the importance of compassion, because I think that is the emphasis of the Malazan series as a whole. But I think specifically in Gardens of the Moon, I think especially with the Crocus storyline, especially with the Sari storyline, and in a sense with the Lorne and Toole storyline, the loss of innocence because of ambition, I think, is a big theme in this work, and the destructive elements of ambition as a whole, I think, is also a very strong through point from Taishrin and whatever happens at Pale all the way to Darujhistan and the council members and those storylines I already mentioned. So I think that's something that you have to keep. Question 6, casting has begun. So this is going to be the part that the comments are going to blow up on. I want you to. So let me know your casting of Gardens of the Moon. I'll give you mine, obviously. Let me know what you think of them, but I want to hear your guys' ideas as well. So obviously I can't go through the entire Dramatis Personae because that would take forever, but I did a handful of what I think are the most interesting characters to cast. So first, Whiskey Jack. I first thought of sort of like a grizzled, like George Clooney type, but I didn't think that was as interesting. I think Whiskey Jack, it's so important for him to be morose, almost depressed, but not in sort of an emotional way, but almost in an emotionless way, just very sort of gruff and removed. And I think no one really does that as well as Benicio del Toro. So that's who I'm putting at that Whiskey Jack role, that sort of quieter leader type. Perrin, this is an interesting character because you have to go from sort of motivated warrior to someone who is sort of like Whiskey Jack, jaded, wanting distance from the life of a soldier, but also like a natural leader with charisma. And so I chose Daniel Kaluuya. Most of you probably know him from Get Out. He also had a turn in Black Panther and a couple other movies. I think he is great at portraying this like charisma, but also so much happening sort of behind the eyes as he acts, being able to see sort of his inward machinations just through how he portrays what's happening. And I think that's really important for Perrin, who is probably the closest thing to a main protagonist in Gardens of the Moon. For the love interest, Tattersail, I would love that. This is probably the one that I feel best about, Merritt Wever. If you saw Marriage Story this last year, she plays Scarlett Johansson's sister. She is so great at having a presence in a scene without having like many lines. And she just is this beautiful mix of what I think Tattersail is supposed to be. Confidence, but also a softness. Really like Merritt Wever as an actress, and I think this would be a great role for her to play. Kalam and Quick Ben, one of the best romances. I love these two in the books, and so I really thought hard about who should play them in the movie. This is what I came up with. For Kalam, a very jacked Idris Elba, and Quick Ben, Jeffrey Wright. Now, Idris Elba is probably very well known, whether from Thor movies or the speculation that he might be Bond or The Office. You've probably seen Idris Elba. He can do a lot of great stuff, and he really does sort of quiet strength that I think Kalam really would be necessary, as well as the physical presence to do that. Jeffrey Wright, you might have seen him in Westworld, actually another James Bond connection. He was in a couple of the James Bonds as the American agent. He again sort of has this quiet thoughtfulness that Quick Ben obviously has, but he also has a little bit of a cocky side, or he can portray that in his films, especially like I mentioned in the Bond films. So Jeffrey Wright I think would be fantastic. I mean, that beard on Quick Ben and just his way of speaking is so like Quick Ben, sort of knowing, deep, and yet in some ways petulant almost. I think Jeffrey Wright would do a great job. I love this duo and how it would look on screen. Sorry and Crocus. Really, I think the heartbeat of this book is going to, especially the film adaptation of the book, is going to have to be the relationship between these two. And again, those themes of innocence being sort of jaded through other people's ambition and arrogance. And so I think these has to be two great actors. I think Crocus, this is kind of an easy slam dunk, but Timothée Chalamet is one of the best young actors we have. He has sort of a slight frame, which I think would really do well to present what we know as Crocus, sort of this boyish thief who grows into this more, well, I won't say what happens in the series, but I think Timothée Chalamet can really grow into what he becomes. And he's just a great character of portraying sort of innocence lost. Call Me By Your Name, fantastic film, that he does this beautifully. And in the context of a love story. And so I think that would work well in this sort of odd love story between him and Sari/Apsalar. Speaking of Sari/Apsalar, this might be a pick that not a lot of people know the name, but I think you will. Thomasin McKenzie is a great young actress. Leave No Trace is a film that I recommend. I think it's on Amazon Prime right now to check out. She is fantastic. She's also in The King as well as Jojo Rabbit this past year, so probably you've seen some of those films. She is so good at both just generally in acting and portraying what is happening, even with a character that doesn't say very much. But she's also very like playful and fun, but also, especially in Jojo Rabbit, has sort of a, again, sort of a cockiness, a swagger about her, and that is exactly what Sari and even Apsalar needs. I think she would be a slam dunk in this role. And like I mentioned in The King, we've seen her and Timothée Chalamet in scenes before together, and they do have a bit of a chemistry, so I think that would work well in the film adaptation. Finally, a couple of the Phoenix Inn crew. Krupp, this is so hard to nail down who Krupp would actually be. I went back and forth with a lot of people. I eventually settled on Benedict Wong. Probably most people know him as Wong from the Doctor Strange movies, and I think that role sort of shows what he could do with a Krupp-like role, because he is at times very, very silly, and I think he delivers that in such a great deadpan way that you need as Krupp, because Krupp is this like persona that he puts on all the time, and it's always dry. He never cracks, and I think Benedict Wong would do a great job about doing that, as well as just be a joyful presence on screen, and that would really sell the kind of crazy character that Krupp is. Murillo and Cole, I already said Murillo might have to go. Great person to play this fallen noble is going to be Armie Hammer. Again, he's a great character actor we've seen in Call Me By Your Name, but if you haven't seen the film Sorry to Bother You, in that film he is this crazy, coked out Silicon Valley tycoon. He's just nuts. I think sort of a mix of that character, but you see very briefly afterwards, like after a night of partying, he's kind of like out of it. That's sort of the Cole that I see, sort of this drunk, out of it, obviously very attractive, but kind of scraggly and scruffy. Like that's what I think Armie could really pull off well there. Finally, Ralik Nam, a really badass assassin. I don't know, just a guy with a lot of swagger. John Cho, I think would be amazing. A little known movie that probably not a lot of people have seen called Columbus. I think is great. Cho his acting chops. But also just overall, I think he's a great actor, and I think you do a lot with that role. So there we go. I know there's a whole ton of other, people that we'd want to assign actors to, but I'm going to move on so that this whole video is not just going through person by person actors I think would fit well. If you want me to do that, let me know in the comments, and I can expand a little more, especially for you huge Malazan heads. Maybe I can just do the series as a whole if that's things people would be interested in. But moving on here to number 7, the question here, who is going to direct your book to movie adaptation? Why? Now, I went back and forth a lot on this because, as I said previously, I think a huge theme of the loss of innocence because of ambition would suit someone like Jennifer Kent really well. She's the director who did The Babadook and more recently The Nightingale, which I think is also very key about like the brutality of humanity and the loss of innocence because of that. And I think she wouldn't shy from some of the adult themes here, but we haven't really seen how she would do with like large set pieces, which Gardens of the Moon has at least 2 or 3 that would need to be doing really well. So then I thought, from a more wider perspective, one of the great things about Malazan is that it is a postmodern critique of the genre of fantasy, and I think a director that would really fall in love with that idea is Rian Johnson. Most people know him from The Last Jedi. I know that's a divisive film. I love it. It's like my third favorite Star Wars film ever because of that subversion, and I think that it really says something, which not all Star Wars movies do. He also recently did Knives Out, which was very fun. He did a great sci-fi film called Looper a couple years ago. Brick, his first film, really, really good. So he's a great director, and he's good about taking a genre and twisting it into something that we haven't seen before in a really strong way. And that's exactly what Malazan does. So I think he could take sort of the fantasy trope from a film perspective, especially like with Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings, but like that now is sort of the template for anything you do fantasy-wise. Take that and just twist it a little bit to convey what I think Malazan is doing as a whole. He's also shown that he's great with big action set pieces, which I think is necessary for someone who's going to take on this story. So, Rian Johnson. Question 8. What is the ideal length for this film? Keeping in mind that most studios won't release a movie longer than 3 hours. Thankfully, as I just said, Rian Johnson is our director. He has made long movies and made money doing it. So I think we can get the studio to let us do a 2.5 hour to 2 hours 45 minutes, which would be necessary to sort of get all the small little plot lines of Gardens of the Moon done well and not feel rushed. We can hit that. Question 9. Alas, the movie studio dictates that your adaptation is too long. A scene must go. Which one is the victim? I already said Hairlock is going to go, which is a pretty big loss, especially in the first half of the book, as well as some of like the wonder and fun. So I think I've already sort of checked my boxes there. But if you're going to make me go even further from that, I think I would cut out Circle Breakers scenes. That's a really cool idea, and it works well with the Corrupt storyline, but I don't think it is necessary to have one more sort of stray line of intrigue in Darugistan for a film adaptation. 10th, pushback time. As the film's producer, you're allowed to select one scene which can never be cut. Which scene do you choose? If you saw my spoiler review of Gardens of the Moon, you know what scene I'm going to pick. It is Adjunct Lorne after she has freed Raced, reflecting on the tyranny of humanity and how that corrupted this particular Jagged and why they fear Jagged tyrants so much, because it reflects humanity. I think that is an incredible scene. It'd be really hard to do because it all sort of takes place in Lorne's head or her sort of whispering out loud. So you'd have to do like a flashback or something. Or maybe this would be a conversation between her and Toole. The adaptation would be hard, but that scene must stay because that is a key movement in the series as a whole, and especially in this book, and I think it is incredibly profound. So that scene is going to stay no matter what. And I do think that's a scene that would be in danger, because I don't think Lorne is sort of a main character, and their function has really already been completed with releasing Raced. So I think there would be a push to sort of get rid of this scene with characters that don't really serve a function anymore. I think you gotta have it. So good. So there you go. That is my Adapt a Book tag for Gardens of the Moon. I really want to hear from you guys. Please, 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 in the comments below. Also, share this video around. I'm just so excited to have a conversation about this, whether it's about casting, whether it's about who to cut, what not to cut. Let me know. I can't tell you guys how excited I am to hear what you think of this. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. As always, first in, last out.